meeting of the Local Issues Subcommittee of Cabinet. We'll go straight into membership of the committee. Is it agreed?
Councillor Nahid Maida, portfolio holder for environment.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Paul Davies, cabinet member for corporate.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, are they agreed? Yes? Interest? Or any interest to declare? No? Thank you. Admission of the public? Yep, that's fine. Deputations and petitions, are there any? Are there any deputations or petitions?
No deputations or petitions received, but there was a number of members of the public who have registered to speak on the item.
Yes, of course. Public question time. Any questions from the general public? No?
No questions received.
Members' question time. Questions from councillors? Have we any? Okay. So we move really to the first substantive item, which is the proposed puffing crossing and traffic calming measures, Fenny Lane and St Helens Gate, Almonbury. Do you want to introduce this?
Hi, I'm Dean Barker from Highway Safety. I've been asked to speak through how this scheme came about as briefly as I can and succinctly. We were asked to put a puffing crossing on Fenny Lane, serving existing desire lines for school pupils going between Almonbury Town Centre and the school, King James School that is. We carried out surveys. We found 150 approximately pupils in a morning going south through this site within 50 metres of the centre of that existing road hump. We found 25 going in the opposite direction in an evening, with the balance of pupils continuing along St Helens Gate and crossing at various locations, including through the junction mouth. The reason for that, we perceived, was because of issues with the steps and the crossing of St Helens Gate, which is much safer in the southbound direction than it is in the northbound direction. The crossing was originally proposed slightly east of that road hump. The reason for that at the time was it was believed that visibility to the crossing couldn't be achieved coming down the hill from Almonbury. However, we commissioned a topographical survey so we could accurately measure visibility, and we found that we could place the crossing directly on the existing hump and achieve the visibility that was necessary if we could achieve a 3.4 mile/hour reduction in speeds coming down the hill. At that point, we added the road hump that you can see to the left of the plan at reference 3 to achieve that reduction in speed, along with extending the 20 mile/hour zone. Once we decided where the crossing was going, the next issue was St Helens Gate. Now, when pupils are crossing in the southbound direction, it is generally quite safe. The reason being, they walk to the bottom of the steps at where they meet St Helens Gate on the outside of a bend, and they've got good visibility in both directions. The wait sheltered between the walls at the bottom of the steps and then cross to the southern footway and carry on down to the school. However, coming in the reverse direction, they're crossing from the inside of the bend and visibility is extremely poor at that point due to the high boundary walls and the narrow footways. It's also an issue that there is no footway on the northern side of the road there, so if somebody is already occupying the steps and you leave the southern footway, you've got nowhere safe to stand when you're crossing in the northbound direction. That's why the two build-outs that you can see, 12 and 13 references, were proposed. We'd originally wanted to put a one-way system here, but that was not very well received by the residents. So we eventually dropped that proposal to maintain two-way traffic and have the give-way coming up the hill. So people coming down the hill from the junction would have priority. Excuse me. Ordinarily, you would do it the other way round because it can be more disruptive for traffic coming uphill to give way. But we were mindful of congestion problems at the Fenny Lane St Helens Gate junction, hence we reversed the direction of the give way. So that's what purpose the build-out serve. Other issues that came around in the design were that if we located the crossing on the hump where we have it now, we couldn't maintain parking along the verge between the crossing location and the St Helens Gate junction. It would be extremely detrimental to visibility to the crossing and to people crossing there if we had parked vehicles in there, which is why we proposed the bollards and removal of the parking. Additionally, we were aware that there were congestion issues at the junction, particularly when people turn left in from Fenny Lane to St Helens Gate. The reason for that is that the junction angle is extremely acute. Also, St Helens Gate junction mouth is very narrow. Effectively, when you turn left in, you've got no visibility of any traffic coming up St Helens Gate until you meet it. That can cause congestion. If that happened and queues went back into the crossing, which would only take 2 or 3 cars to do that, you would have some serious road safety problems with cars queuing through a controlled crossing. So we also proposed to ban the left turn in. In turn, that led to us able to put another crossing through St Helens Gate at the top, which is reference 09. Therefore, in doing that, we could also get people from the southern side of St Helens Gate to the Puffin crossing without them having to use the steps, which had been pointed out to us during consultation that the scheme was potentially discriminatory against people with mobility impairment because the steps are very steep and very narrow and difficult to negotiate. We had originally looked at improving the steps, but that was found not to be viable. So in providing the build-out to ban the left turn in, we can also provide a crossing through that side of the junction, which then opens up the route to less able pedestrians. We also propose to put a 20-mile-an-hour zone all the way along St Helens Gate, as well as extending the one on Fenny Lane, and to provide the 2 road humps you see on screen, just to help reduce vehicle speeds on the approach to the build-out, the crossing and the give-ways. The additional weighting restrictions were proposed also to protect the operation of the build-out and to protect pedestrians using the crossing. I believe that covers everything in the scheme.
Thank you, that's very helpful. With some objectors? Sorry. We have some objectors. First of all, John Robertson. I'm going to take those objectors who are here in person first. John Robertson, would you like to speak, John?
Morning, can everyone hear me? My name's John Robertson. I live at 2931 St Helens Gate, so for those of you who don't know where that is, if you look at the plan, number 11 and number 9 point on there, that's the front door of my house. Whereas we're not adverse to having the traffic issues there, what we are adverse to the fact is my 84-year-old father who's got a disabled badge and is disabled, and the depth of that road to get to our bottom drive and the steepness means that we have to park our car on the double yellow lines on the new proposed drawing, which at the moment, and to be fair to Dean Barker, who's been very helpful with this and said, you know, you can do it, the wording here is quite specific. Prohibition of loading and at any time on these double yellow lines. So that affects me with deliveries to my house, especially my father being able to come to the house. And whereas we don't want to park there, and we never have parked there since we've lived there for 4 years, the flexibility means that our drive is 65 metres further down, and we have a 28-foot difference in height between the bottom of our drive and our patio where our back door is. So both deliveries, shopping, we can't do that. So we need to have the flexibility. Now, to be fair to Dean, who's spoken to my fiancée, with the bollards in this position, there is room there to actually park on the top side, so the left-hand side on the drawing of number 11, to be able to offload parents and the rest of it. What I don't want to get into the situation of is someone coming up and saying you're breaking traffic regulations, no stopping. So we need to be clear from the discussion we'd had with Dean before, where we thought it would be acceptable that we can have, because we're probably the only house in this whole plan that has gone from having parking, historical parking outside a house, to having no parking at all. We need to understand that we can have parking for offloading purposes outside our property. That will also affect the sale of our property. We've just had it valued at 1.1 to 1.2 million. So at the end of the day, there's a financial cost to us if we're not careful, that we could end up with the fact that we will discriminate against the type of people who can buy our property due to the fact that they can't get access onto it. So that's the first point. My second point, I'm an electrical contractor and I do a lot of work in the industry, and the DDA compliance, disability element of this, I don't think it's really been considered. I think, to be fair, you've put in a proposal for disabled people further up the road as to get this through, and I don't mean that in any disrespect, but at the end of the day, that corner of the road there, with the height difference between Fenny Lane and St Helens Gate, means that the angle and the steepness of that road for a person in a wheelchair or partially sighted to try and cross that with the camber coming down St Helens Gate, and also the icy conditions that we have in the winter months, makes that impossible with two-way traffic coming down St Helens Gate, as long as with two-way traffic going up Fenny Lane. So in fact, I think they're more prejudiced by that position than they would be using the crossing and coming down the steps. And we had Paragon Highways do a report back in March, which we submitted with our initial application for complaint on this application, and they highlighted quite clearly that the step condition, which is excluded from this application as a future development of the steps in the future. So we're doing the puffing crossing, we're doing all the roadworks, but we're leaving the steps and the condition in. Don't comply with any of the common regs. Now, again, you could say, well, it's existing, but being an electrical contractor, I can't go to someone's house who's got old wiring, do new wiring, and leave old wiring in place. And that you've got to bring it up to the standard. So the handrail, the anti-slip, the width of the steps, the tread heights of those steps mean that even partially sighted people or people are struggling to be able to use those existing steps if you do not make them compliant with the legal regs for disabled people to come down. And I think that should be a must. Now, at the moment, you've got that as a future plan, which means it's a financial issue, not a practical issue. Now, we're looking at, for me, I'm looking at everyone who lives down St Helens Gate. This isn't just about a school who need it for an hour in the morning and half an hour in the afternoon. This is about general public and the age of people who live down St Helens Gate. Everyone is my age, 50 plus and older. So the use of steps, which I totally agree with, and the puffing crossing, they need to be made compliant so you can use those steps safely at all times from all hours of the day. They're lit properly, the tread heights are right, the handrails are correct, so that everyone can use those, and I don't think that's been considered. And by putting it as a future recommendation, it will never happen. On the third point of that is, at the moment, I've got some photographs which I'll submit, but at the moment I'm the one who actually trims the bushes and the tree outside those steps, because the bushes go over the steps, so I actually come every year and I cut those back. So the council aren't doing a lot of effort to actually maintain those steps as they are now, yet alone going forward when we've got kids, directing all the kids to come down there. So we've only got an 800mm gap to come down those steps, which is very tight, with a handrail which hasn't got the right distance. You need 140mm, I think it is, under DDA, to have a proper grab handle so that you can hold a handle properly. And really, for two-way traffic, you should have a handle on both sides of the stairs so people going up the stairs and people coming down the stairs can have it. So the steps, to me, need to be addressed. As I say, the Paragon report, I can't find any reference to our appeal where we've actually had Paragon Highways also justify that under their terms. And then finally, if you look at point 14 on the map, which is just below our front door, where you look at the traffic coming up St Helens Gate. So if you imagine now that we've now got built out sides on either side of that, and again, the problem is a flat plan doesn't show the steepness of St Helens Gate. And that's the problem with all of this survey, is that parking that position there, waiting to move, the visual line now with the school kids who could be standing on those pavements on both sides, the top of Fenny Lane, the visual impact of that, which you need to see on a picture to understand, is that you've got a very, very small window where you can actually see the traffic coming down the hill. So if you have school children standing on both sides of that and you reduce the gap, the visual line for the person to pull out from going up St Helens Gate now is reduced drastically by the fact that you've got kids standing on both sides of the pavement. So again, on a flat plan it looks fine, it looks like work, but with the visual it just doesn't work. So again, I took photos, and the final part on that, and then I'll shut up, is everyone coming from Fenny Lane down St Helens Gate. It's a 3.5 metre approximately opening at the top of there, so it's not wide enough for two-car traffic, which everyone's recognised. means that the natural line of the car coming down St Helens Gate means that they're actually halfway across the centre line of the road. There's no centre line on that road actually, but so actually they're about 1.5 metres further off the wall of Fenny Lane into the middle of the road. So again, road positioning of cars coming down there already is a problem. At speed, coming out downhill with downward force down the hill. So my objections are, firstly, that parking outside my house really important to me and my family. That needs to be reviewed, and I respectfully understand you need the yellow lines. All you're doing by doing that is making me park halfway down that road. I can't get my family up or deliveries. Second one is the DDA compliance to the Pelican, how people come from a puffing crossing across the road with disabilities. I don't think that's been considered. The step and the quality of steps aren't compliant, and again, I think they need to be added to this. If you're going to go forward with this, you have to spend the money and develop it to make everyone work better with it. And then finally, the Paragon report, as I say, I don't see any reference to it in this, even though we have appealed to this back in March of last year. And finally, the northbound traffic coming up. I don't think enough consideration has been given to the slope of the road and the actual visual window that drivers will have when they actually go up the hill with school children standing on both sides of the road. And again, I'd like to submit some photographs just so you've got them. They're printed out. I've only got one copy, but if you'd be happy to accept those, I'll pass them over. Thank you very much.
Officer, like to respond to that?
Forgive me if I don't get these in the right order. Regarding the steps, that wasn't a financial decision. We don't have the structural engineering expertise in-house to take it on, is the truth of the matter. What I originally wanted to do was to change the direction of the steps to be perpendicular to how they are now, widen them, and then provide a handrail. Because that's a retaining structure and there's such a level difference at that point between the top and the bottom, that requires some structural design expertise, which we don't have in-house to do, which is why that element of it was dropped. Regarding street lighting of the steps, we are going to put anti-grip surfacing on. I've also sent an inquiry through to our street lighting team about putting another lamp column on that northern side of the road where that build-out is. For the reasons you mentioned, I was concerned about lighting as well. And the fact that we're putting a crossing there, I think that covers the steps. I take your point about the crossing at the top, that it is on a slope. However, it's not too severe a slope such that people, won't be able to negotiate it. Accepting what you said, that during slippery conditions, perhaps it will be difficult for some users. I agree with you. Unfortunately, I don't see another option in terms of that, or what you could do about that. This is the road layout here, it goes back hundreds of years. It is the way it is, and we're trying to make the best of what we've got there. The width of St Helens Gate at the top regarding traffic come down there, it's not 3.5 metres, it's just short of 5 metres. The gap you see on the crossing is actually 4 metres wide, and I believe it's 4.9 at its narrowest point at the top. The speed of traffic coming down there is going to be arrested by that road hump. It really will. We've got existing speed readings now on St Helens Gate, and the 85th percentile speeds are 19 miles an hour. That's without these traffic calming measures in and without the give way feature in. So I'm not convinced that the traffic speeds are going to be an issue with regard to the crossing. As for visibility, I've checked visibility both horizontally and vertically. For speeds as they are now, at 19 miles an hour, I suspect that the 85th percentile speeds are going to drop to something like 15 or less with the road humps in and the narrowing. And visibility at the crossing is fine, both in the horizontal and the vertical plane, both visibility for pedestrians and of pedestrians, and at the give way line of oncoming traffic. I accept what you say, that if large groups of pedestrians are waiting on that nib, that will affect visibility for the driver sitting at the give way line. But I would hope that I would certainly, if I was sat in there and I couldn't see any oncoming traffic because there were children waiting to cross, I would let the children cross before I even contemplated negotiating the narrowing. Was there anything else? Yes, regarding dropping off and picking up, yes, you can drop off and pick up your relatives outside there, and the nib was designed in that way specifically because I spoke to your wife and I was concerned that I didn't want to, do anything to disrupt that. You can also have deliveries because there's no loading restrictions there, and in fact, with the nib behind you, if you're going to park up in front of it, arguably there's some protection for you as well while you're doing that there. Was there anything else? Did I miss?
A general point about access to Mr. Robertson's property. I think that's a fair comment, isn't it?
And what Sorry, I've missed that one.
Access to, is severely inconvenienced by access to his own property, yeah?
I don't agree with that, no. Because his front door's there, but he can still park within 5 or 6 metres of his front door to go in and out through the steps. That was it was part of the consideration when I was doing the design.
Colleagues, comments?
I'm confident, Mr. Robertson, that the points you have raised, the officers have listened to and continue to listen. The problem we have here are very limited options. The geography is against us. And one of the things, we're not doing this because we just feel like making our residents' life difficult. This was one of the conditions for the new school. So what we're doing this for is the paramount safety of the pedestrian, not only school children. It includes our residents. It includes a wide range of access in terms of abilities, and it doesn't actually, well, although it includes the drivers, but drivers are part of the overall formula. So for the first time, we're concentrating on making sure that the road conditions are safe as possible. We've had the assessments, we've continued to listen. We're listening to you still. We will continue to listen and make sure that what is delivered is the best possible solutions. I know this particular stretch of the road. I use it regularly. I actually live on a hill where I am at the moment. Visibility is key, but you also then have to think about whether we do anything or not. Visibility, speed limit, access, parking has always been an issue here. And I think what we are presenting is a much better thought through scheme. Now, nobody's saying it's perfect, but it's the best we can come up with. And the priority in terms of the planning condition was paramount safety of the pedestrian. We need to ensure that we deliver on that. And I think what's being put forward here does do that. And I hope that it doesn't impact on your property. I hope it's a privilege to be able to park in front of your property. I think what you have now is a better outlook. It gives you more secure drop-off point. It allows you to park just slightly to the side, but it has considered you as an owner of a property on that stretch of the road. And as for all the steps, we do realise, and as Dean has said, that there are some things that we recognise that we're unable to do. But it doesn't mean in the future we can stop. If engineering solutions come up, that we won't do anything about it. Sometimes it's difficult to deliver everything in one go, but I think this is the optimum in terms of the talking and listening we've done. We've got to now get on in being able to deliver some of what we've been saying. And from what I've sat here and listened to you, I think you would agree with me that we have done that. We are listening. And we are trying to come up with solutions. The geography is against us. Whether we have this scheme or not is always an issue. It's always been this difficult because when we built these villages, we didn't have as many people, as many cars, as many diverse uses as we do at the moment. Thank you.
Very briefly, I think Councillor Mather's really covered it very comprehensively. I think just to emphasise key points, as we know, it is about the safety of the school children. I think I'm pleased to hear from the officer that the amount of effort that's gone into listening to residents, and in particular to the issues raised today. And I think, as we say, that certainly the ability ongoing for that parking, for dropping off and deliveries, I think would resolve some of the issues raised. And I do agree that pinch point there that going out into the road does offer some protection. And take the point which has been raised about the sight lines going up, but as the officer said, I really would think that because of where that crossing is positioned, and with children on the side of the road, and with the stopping point there in terms of the give way, that drivers would wait until those children are crossed, until they've got that full vision going up. So for me, when we talk through this, the scheme just seems to there seems to be one calming issue on top of another calming issue, and there seems to be a culmination of something which actually makes that road a lot safer than it is at present. So yeah, absolutely agree with Councillor Mather on the other points that she raised as well.
Thanks, Paul. Would you like to add anything further?
No, thank you for your comments. I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't about me saying don't do it. I'm not saying that. I totally get it. I'm just saying that I want to make sure it's right for my family. Sure. And and at the same time, yes, the school kids are really important, but for me, it's about general public and a sense of community. It's not just about school kids. If you're doing these changes, for me, you develop it for the whole of Almonbury, that everyone can use that passage safely. And so for me, maybe my wording's not right because I'm not used to these environments, but for me, I would always strive to try and make the best I can of what I've got. And that's why the step issue for me is that, for me, it should be something that I feel passionate about, only because make it DDA compliant so that disabled people and normal people and well-lit can all use that facility rather than to do a compromise. Because for me, the compromise with the DDA element at the far end there now means that I do think that the disabled people are actually discriminated against, because that corner of that road with the traffic that's there isn't managed, whereas the school kids are managed. I totally agree. But that corner of that road there, and I know left-hand turning will help, will still make it difficult if you're partially sighted or if you're in a wheelchair with no one there forcing the issue of a flashing light to stop you crossing the road. Those people will be victimised, wrong word, those people will be prejudiced against the kids who can use a puffing crossing that's got flashing lights. Thank you very much.
Well, undoubtedly, this is a compromise. Naheed, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that as far as I'm concerned, from reading, from listening to the officers, from listening to you, that the scheme we put in place is much more inclusive. It considers the range of pedestrians and their needs, and our residents, and those going through, as well as the children. For the first time, we're looking at a scheme which puts the pedestrian at the heart of this road safety issues rather than always thinking about the drivers. Now, we have to have a sense of balance in order to actually come up with the solutions. And I do think, and I take on board what you're saying, but it is more inclusive of those who are using wheelchairs, who may be partially sighted. And as we grow older, disabilities follow us. But you see, you have to recognise the starting point, where you started and where you're getting to. It is much more improved, and it will continue to improve. We will continue to listen to our residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Naheed. Clearly, this is a compromise, John, and I think the points you made are broadly valid, but there's been a very serious attempt to address the difficulties. And the solution isn't ideal, it isn't perfect, but in the circumstances, I think it's dealing with a complex situation as well, I think, as it possibly can be, and I think also within the law. Nick Palfreman?
He's not here.
Pardon?
He's not here.
Oh, he's not here, okay. Bernard, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. I'd like to thank Dean for what he's done for the work. I'm not complaining about what he's done, but I'd like to talk about, was any alternative to a crossing considered? Because other schools in other areas, what they do, they can close a road off for example, during the morning and afternoon when it's particularly busy. Why wasn't that option looked at?
You're talking about a school street where we close roads, and that's not off the table, but it's not been progressed by highway safety. It's health, and because of COVID, that's been significantly delayed, and they will do some trials, hopefully, in the near future, but we can't say when that will be, and it will probably be after the development's gone ahead. So it was felt that we needed to do something now rather than just wait and see what happens.
So this is the third blueprint. I mean, Dean's been involved in negotiations, and I've been involved in back and forth with emails, haven't we? And I know that he has compromised. I know he definitely has. But can you tell me why no alternative place was considered? For example, on Westgate as a crossing, which meant you'd only. Okay,
sorry. The brief I was given was to put the crossing here because that's where it was identified, and it was justified from account with the number of pupils who were crossing there. Is the short answer. There were 150, and from the figures I understand of how many pupils walk to the school, that's 55% of all pupils who walk have crossed through that road hump, going one direction at the moment, granted, and not in the other direction, but I think I've laboured that point why I think that's the case. That's 55% of all pupils who walk. A proportion of those are walking from south of the school, a proportion of them are walking from Dark Lane, a proportion of them are walking from St Helens Gate south of this site. So it's clear to me that the vast majority of pupils who are coming from the town centre and down here are following that because it is the desire line for them. It is what they see to be the most direct route running north to south through there. So to my mind, that's the right place for the crossing, is the short answer.
So we want some virtual contributions now from Helen Tones. Can we have that?
Miss Turns, if you could please unmute your microphone, I've just enabled it for you, thank you. Miss Turns, to find the microphone button, if you look at the top right of the Teams screen, and there'll be a few buttons in a toolbar near the button that says leave. If you go on a couple, there'll be an image of a microphone with a cross through it. Can you find that?
Communicating via this media, if you could just state your objections, that would be helpful. Is that okay with you? Ms. Tomes? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, but we may come back to you, Ms. Tones, but we have to move on for the moment. I will bring in now Alison Munro. Is she available?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thank the officer for his work on this, and the slight space for declared a climate emergency. The council have an active travel policy. Reducing congestion in the area of the school in St Helens Gate is important. However, I am concerned for the interest of residents as follows. I do not feel objection 3 has been adequately addressed, and I feel that needs looking at. I'm aware residents parking close to 13 to 21 Fenny Lane frequently have their wing mirrors smashed and their sides of their cars hit. This issue needs addressing as part of this scheme, as they need somewhere safe to park their cars. Parking spaces are being lost as a consequence of these proposals. I would therefore like to propose that alternative parking provision is found for the residents affected by these losses. I have therefore identified some land close by at the top of Blacksmith's Fold, where there is a very wide grass verge immediately below the small parking area at the top. This may be suitable for a residents' parking scheme. I would therefore like this looking at as part of this scheme and funding through this scheme. Or alternatively, could the existing car park that is there be turned into a residents-only parking scheme? If parking can be found for residents affected by the loss and the objection 3 in the report addressed, and a school street implemented down St Helens Gate in the future, I would be happy with these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Karen, would you like to add anything? I'm sure you've had a conversation on this issue with Councillor Munro previously.
As part of the planning condition, there is another planning condition which ensures that the school undertakes a parking review once the development's gone ahead and parking patterns have all settled down. At the moment, we don't know where they're going to go. We can guess, but that's not the best way to do a scheme. It would be better to see exactly what happens and then reassess the parking. And the suggestion by Councillor Munro will be taken into consideration as part of that work. Is that all right? Does that answer it clearly?
Alison, are you happy with that response?
Yes, I have actually already sent in the information about the area of land I've identified. I've sent in photographs, but I really would like that looking at as part of this scheme and funding through this scheme. It's only right that because residents are losing their spaces, that somewhere else is found for them. It's really not safe to park your car down that part of Fenny Lane at all. People are really being affected by this as well. So it's really important that the council does its very best to find somewhere for people to park. I think that should be part of this scheme, and I really feel the objection I've referred to, and I think objection 3 really needs looking at, if possible. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Alison, I think it's fair to say the officers have gone a great many miles in order to resolve or provide a sensible compromise in these circumstances. So the point is noted. Can we come to Councillor Paula Davies?
Councillor Davies, will you enable your mic for me, please?
I'm sorry, I thought Councillor Paul Davies had been called up, not myself, sorry. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Carry on, yeah. We can hear you.
Sorry, I can only hear a lot of background noise. There's been a lot of eloquent talk from the residents in the area. I've been lobbied by and spoken to by many people who living along Fenny Lane and around the area about the disproportionality of the issues. While residents do appreciate that student safety is important, and I know that we are driving to make sure that more and more young people will walk to school and reduce the traffic and how important that all is. do believe that the current scheme is disproportionate to the benefits. It's going to be a 365-day a year, 24-hour a day impact on the residents in the area for a minor impact. And having seen how the young people walk to school, I honestly don't believe they will be driven to use the crossings. I agree that there are a large number of people who use the crossing on the way to school, but they completely swarm the junction. Many people take the path of least resistance and cross to St Helens Gate at the top near Westgate, and it's only a few students who are funneled down the steps. Those steps are treacherous, and the additional disabled crossing at the top is very, very unsafe. Not just in the camber on the crossing of the road itself, but in the approach on the Fenny Lane side of it. It is steep, it is difficult. And I think what I pulled together from the plans that we've seen, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that that the officers have put a great deal of work into doing this. I just don't think it addresses the wider issues. We've already said today that we haven't considered this wider travel plan, school roads and all of that. I think we do need to look at the broader options here and look at a broader scheme. A lot of compromises and adjustments have been made to the plan, and Councillor Mather said that it's the best we can do. But just because it's the best and only thing we can do, and that we've got so far along the scheme, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing. Because it's the best thing we can do with what we've got, doesn't mean it's the right thing we should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, would you want to make any response to that?
I take your point about parking, and it is an issue around there, but what I would say is that the original scheme as well, when I first took it over, had the crossing east of where it is now. And one of the drivers that kind of contributed to moving it onto the hump was the fact that the zigzag markings extended down in front of the properties at the top end of Fenny Lane, numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, that area, who all complained they had no alternative places to service the properties. And I realise that's the case. And in moving it to where it is now, it's not actually preventing parking outside any of those properties, accepting it reduces parking as a whole in the area. I think you're right about the problems further down Fenny Lane, and it does need looking at, but as Karen said, that's part of the plan is to do that after this happens. There's a disproportionate distribution between the footways along there. I know outside the properties you're speaking about, the footway's only about 500 or 600 millimetres wide, but it's over 2 metres wide on the northern side. There is scope to do something along there in the longer term, but as Karen said, we need to know what's going to happen first with the parking and where it's going to go before we can look at that. The crossing is not just for school pupils. That was never on my agenda. I know that's what drove it, but it's about the wider public as well. It's about other pedestrians in Almondbury and giving them, the best access routes we can.
I think it's fair to say we had to compromise here, and I think there's been every effort made to address the issues that you're referring to. Excuse me, please. So, can we try to get Helen Tones back in? Is that possible?
Hi, Mrs. Tones. We're going to try you one more time through the Teams meeting. So,
just bear with me. I think I've unmuted the microphone.
Excellent. When you're ready, Mrs. Tones.
Right, thank you. Chair, firstly, it is welcomed that it is recognised that there is a need for traffic calming measures for St Helens Gate and also a safe road crossing to be above St Helens Gate. However, there are several issues that need addressing, and these are my concerns. Within what I'm about to say, there are a series of questions. However, I will not expect answers until the end. Right, with regards to the speed restrictions first. 1, how will Kirklees ensure that the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is enforced, as this has not been referred to, as vehicles will still likely speed up and down below the speed humps. This regularly occurs, and we hear regular tyre screeching outside our property. Just to clarify, I am a resident of St Helens Gate and have been so for over 20 years. Secondly, we requested as part of the consultation for safety mirrors to be placed on the blind bends on the upper part of St Helens Gate to improve safety for both drivers and pedestrians. This has not been mentioned in the report, and this should be implemented. With regards to the proposed puffin crossing and associated traffic calming measures, reference Appendix D, it says, is anticipated. Please note the word anticipated to be the primary walking route. Firstly, has a detailed written survey of students been done asking exactly where students do cross and why they cross there, as well as where would they wish to cross safely if they could in an ideal world, has been done? No reference to this has been made. Reference point 2.22 in the published papers. What is the detailed breakdown of students using the existing road hump and those crossing the road elsewhere for the mornings and the afternoons? How many observations were actually done and the time frames in which these were done, i.e. say between 8 and 9, as there is no detail provided in the report, i.e. the evidence for using this crossing area. Then has a survey been done, a visual one, as to how the local community crossed the road at the Westgate, Northgate, Fenny Lane junctions? I'm not aware of this happening. As residents and visitors are also expected to use a safe crossing point, surely this should be considered part of the greater plan to meet the community needs and therefore be part of any recommendations made by Highways. People, by nature, will use the quickest crossing point to get from Westgate to Northgate. They will not walk the extra 80 metres down to the Puffin crossing, having crossed the proposed St Helens Gate junction crossing, to then walk to the Puffin crossing and walk back a further 70 metres, i.e. 150 metres plus, when crossing Westgate is only going to be about 15 metres. The report even admits students do not use the steps of end of day, which is actually the most dangerous time, as students all leave at the same time currently. In short, there has been no proper consideration of the needs of the wider community, just the focus on the needs of the school children to meet a planning condition and addressing discrimination concerns raised. Therefore, is this really the best solution delivering value for money to the community? Next, currently residents parking on Fenny Lane will be removed by the proposed crossing. Therefore, they will have to park on Fenny Lane lower down, thus reducing visibility and road width approaching the Puffin crossing, leading to safety issues. What is proposed to reduce the risk to drivers and pedestrians? There is no timeline stated regarding the steps for the realignment and widening and railing that have been referred to on page 31 of the pack. When will this happen, and has any cost been included in the projected £80,000 cost quoted? This has also been referred to by Mr. Robertson. Also, as referred to by Mr. Robertson, these steps are not maintained by Kirklees and currently have ivy growing right across them, a major danger site. With regard to the plans, there is no guardrail to protect those using the lower crossing plateau on the pavement side outside Mr. Robertson's property. How will pedestrian safety be ensured to those on that side of the crossing? In relation to objection 3, no waiting at any time, Highways' response is that people can park on St Helens Gate below the lower crossing. This is dangerous as the road is already narrow with limited room for 2 cars to pass as is. This in turn will lead to reduced visibility of the lower crossing area and will lead to safety issues. Also, please be advised that the emergency services and a local farmer regularly use this route with heavy farm machinery. Have they been consulted, and will the reduced width on this lower crossing point be able to accommodate their vehicles? On top of that, many lorries use St Helens Gate as way of cut through. New signage is needed to be put at both ends of St Helens Gate regarding restricted access of heavy goods vehicles. This has not been mentioned in the report. The proposed drop curb, again, which Mr Robertson has already mentioned, to accommodate those with mobility issues at the top of St Helens Gate, as well as other pedestrians, is dangerous. I have suffered a life-changing injury and my mobility is now impaired. The proposed crossing is unmanned and is not pedestrian controlled and is on a steep angled downward slope, i.e. the actual surface will not be horizontal for people to walk on, but angled down St Helens Gate. It is not safe for people to cross, especially in winter months. Also, to safely cross, one would have to look behind yourself down Fenny Lane to see if vehicles are coming, to make sure then check North Gate, there are no vehicles coming, and then St Helens Gate before crossing. This is not easy when one has restricted movement. Also, as a resident, I regularly see cars often cut through gaps in the traffic to and from St Helens Gate and may not observe pedestrians waiting to cross. Cars that are waiting to enter Northgate from St Helens Gate do so up a slope, and there is a chance that vehicles could roll back through their poor hill starts and hit pedestrians on the crossing. Also, those drivers going up the hill will not be able to see traffic coming up Fenny Lane because if pedestrians are standing waiting to cross. What are highways proposing to mitigate these safety issues? I've also been led to understand that Mr Rimmer, principal of King James's School, who has responsibility for health and safety of his pupils, has at no stage been consulted with over these proposals. Is this true? Why has not a crossing been proposed over the Westgate and Northgate junctions? It is this. It is because these proposals are all linked to a planning application of the 10 classroom expansion of King James's School, conditions 5 and 6. These state, prior to development commencing, i.e. the building at the school, details of a scheme, ... shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. There has been no public consultation done on the crossing before the planning approval was given for those buildings to be built, just a proposal based on anticipated student footfall, no detailed survey of students that was current at the time of the application, nor has there been any consultation or survey done with the resident prior to that application. An application to discharge the conditions 5 and 6, which relates to the crossing, was received by Kirklees on the 18th of February 2021, prior to any public consultation. The first public consultation was held at the end of February, early March this year. The results of this first public consultation have not been made public. Were the results of this consultation shared with planning in order for them to make a full and informed decision to discharge the conditions 5 and 6, as this is not known? Planning discharge approval was given on the 24th of May, but no approval for these schemes has yet been given, a clear condition of the planning conditions laid down for the classroom extension. However, site development has started on the King James's School by the 1st of April. Is this not a breach of planning conditions laid down by Kirklees Planning on Kirklees Council Economy and Skills Capital Delivery Team, the client? The second consultation on the proposals being discussed today was flawed in that whilst public notices were put out to the press, which, by the way, in the modern world, no people really read, as most people use the internet, The contentious Puffin crossing proposal seemed to somehow got missed off the website for public review.
Helen, can I stop you there just for a second? There's very many questions there. I think there must be a chance for officers to answer some, and then we can come back for the rest of your questions. Do you understand? Is that fair enough?
That's fair enough.
Oh, okay. Then just complete. Thank you.
Sorry, did you wish me to complete, or did you want Mr. Barker to answer the questions?
Hi, Mrs. Tones. I'll answer what I can. I've tried to write as quickly as I could. The 20 mile an hour speed limit was the first thing you brought up, and enforcement. You mentioned St Helens Gate as well as Fenny Lane. Enforcement's obviously a police issue, but what I would say about St Helens Gate is the existing speeds are already below 20 miles an hour. That's before we put any traffic calming measures in or a speed limit, so I'm not sure what the issues on speeding vehicles are there. Regarding a mirror on the corner, mirrors are not a specified highway feature as such. The fact is, with the measures in place that are proposed, we wouldn't need one. The purpose of the mirror is to improve visibility, but the scheme that goes in there would achieve that without using a mirror, and that's a much better option than having a concave mirror. The surveys that led to it, there were formal as well as informal surveys. There was what's called a PV squared count that's done, which is a requirement for us before we can put a crossing in. That has to find a given number of pedestrians against vehicle flows to prove there's enough conflict there to justify one. It considers a 100-metre section of road. I accept that the 100-metre section of road does go up towards the junction when it's centred on that road hump and down further down Fenny Lane, and that not everybody crossed on the road hump. I did a survey myself one morning when I was out there, and there were 90 pupils actually crossed through the hump. So, my predecessor who was working on the scheme, Joe, also did a similar survey, and he picked up 84 crossing through the hump. So the design line is there for where we're putting it. Regarding Westgate, Northgate, pedestrian movements there, I haven't done a survey of that because we knew that we picked up the majority of the students coming through the hump, and that was our brief. There may well be issues about pedestrians crossing at Westgate, Northgate. I don't know. I haven't looked at that junction. But I don't think it would be reasonable to try and address that as part of this scheme because this is a different issue. It was never intended to capture all movements and solve all problems for pedestrians within the centre of Almondry. It was quite a specific brief for me personally. What was that one? What else? I'm trying to think. Well, we did consult with the emergency services. They didn't provide any comments. Regarding the drop crossings at the top of St Helens Gate and how suitable that is for people with mobility impairment, I would also point out to everybody that the slope along the footway going up St Helens Gate is no less severe than the slope across that crossing going from one side of the road to the other. And if you can't negotiate that, you can't get to the crossing anyway. It is a hilly place, you know. That's a problem that's prevalent throughout, so I'm not sure that negates the need to provide one there. We have liaised with planning constantly and consistently throughout this, and I think my colleague Nick's going to answer some of your questions about planning, I presume, if I hand over to him now.
Yes, thank you, Dean. Thank you through you, Chair. Discharge condition applications are not advertised. It is not part of the process set out by national legislation for them. The condition was a phased condition, split into primarily two parts. The first, prior to development commencing, we wanted to see that a strategy had been put forward and designed in early stages. That was done. The scheme was satisfactory for planning purposes. That was with the full knowledge that it would still have to go through separate legislative assessments, such as this traffic regulation order as led by Mr. Barker. So the second part of the condition was for it to be implemented in a given time frame. So we're in the midpoint. It's going through the TRO. And on the assumption, if it were to be approved, then the second stage of the condition would be activated. If the TRO is refused, then it would be back to the beginning for them to consider alternatives. But that's, I believe, everything from a planning point of view.
Just one quick thing. You asked about the school. The school are aware of what's going on. In fact, the headmaster of the school also expressed his lack of support for the one-way system, which many of you, including Mrs. Tomes, also objected to, which was another reason why we dropped it from the proposals. But I can't read that, Karen. Sorry. Yeah, what have you said about that? Sorry.
She wanted HGV access restricted.
Right. I've not looked at HGV. We've not looked at HGV access, no. But from what I recall from the counts that we have, HGV movements along St Helens Gate are extremely rare, which there would be just by the nature of the topography of the route and how narrow it is, you know.
The HGVs, to prevent HGVs going up there, we'd have to do a survey and have a reasonable reason to prevent them from doing so. We would still have to allow access to the school for deliveries and things. And properties, obviously, if somebody was moving, we'd have to allow HGVs through anyway. We're not aware, or we've not been notified of any HGV access. Can they fit through? They can definitely fit through the pinch point, can't they? Yeah. So there's no reason why we should restrict HGV access at all. I will admit that the street notices were put up on St Helens Gate and maintained, although some seemed to go missing at the time. They were advertised in the local newspaper, which is the legal requirement. We do additionally put them on the website, and there was an issue when they were advertised on the website, but we did follow the legal process.
So is it reasonable to conclude that after about 6 months we'll look again at the whole scheme and how it's working out?
Absolutely. We're commissioning surveys to look at traffic flows around the wider network so that we can do them after the scheme's gone in and see what actual effect it has, rather than. There could be, yeah. Depending where any displaced traffic goes, for example, as a result of the banned left turn into St Helens Gate. I mean, some people, one objector had said that might lead to a lot of additional traffic on Dart Lane. Personally, I don't think that's going to happen, because there's only 600 vehicles a day on average go into St Helens Gate, and I suspect 400 or 500 of them are turning right in, because the left turn's so awkward you wouldn't do it unless you have to. So I don't think there'll be any major issues with traffic displacement, but we'll need to look at that. But the flows are low already, so it's inconceivable. Yeah.
I stopped Helen in her tracks because she virtually finished. Have you completely finished, Helen?
I've almost completely finished, Chair. I do have just a couple more comments.
Yes, surely.
Right, okay. When I was last speaking, I obviously mentioned, and you've just said about the publication of the notices. The comment that I wanted to say was, following on from that obviously 2 of the notices were very successfully loaded to the website. The 3rd wasn't. It was only through myself raising that this was not on the website that it got uploaded a few days before the end of the consultation period, therefore not giving people much time to respond with their comments. So this is an observation. Do highways not have any quality processes in place in their department to make sure all TRO information is published accurately and timely on the website? I do not expect an answer on that, but it is an observation. In all of this, it is Kirklees that is the client. I have concerns for the disregard of their own planning processes and their treatment and regard of health and safety at various levels through the poor planning and execution of consultations. This, therefore, is a concern when it comes to matters of governance. With regards to a couple of the comments raised, with regards to the HGVs, what is being asked or suggested is there needs to be improved signage. The current signage really is nonsensical. We have looked into it and it is relatively meaningless. We have had constant breaches of the traffic regulation orders with cement lorries and other massive heavy loads coming up and down St Helens Gate during the construction. Obviously, these will reduce once construction has happened, and they have been notified to the relevant individuals. With regards to what I'm asking, based on what I've said so far, I actually request that the committee requests that a section 73 be sought, that highways go back to planning, asking for an amendment to condition 6 for safe crossing points to be put at the junction of Westgate and Northgate opposite Taste Fine Wines. This is because when you analyse why the students are currently crossing where they do, it is because there is no safe crossing point at the most logical place that most people would normally use. By going back to planning and asking for this change and moving the crossing point that meets the needs of the whole community 24/7 as well as that of the students, this will actually better meet the needs of the broader community and will in actual fact give better value for money of the 80,000 that currently is projected. Thank you, Chair.
Helen, I think for the most part your letter were comments rather than questions. There were one or two questions. Any? All the comments from both members of the council and members of the public. We've had a good coverage of this. What my colleagues want to add anything before we draw a conclusion? Nahid, yep.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to pick up Councillor Paula Davis's point about the best option. It doesn't mean that you ignore any developments, any technical improvements that may come later. I do recognise that young people may not necessarily do what we think they should do, i.e. go use our crossing points. But we do work. Our road safety, school safety sections do work with schools in terms of training, and the school itself can ask for training, and we are very successful in carrying out modal shift type of training to ensure that young people know how to use crossings and where to use them and how to get there safely. So that's one point. In terms of meeting our legal obligations, as the planning officer just mentioned, that the legality is a public notice which was put in the papers and is extra when it goes on the website. It was an oversight which was put there, but the legal obligations were met. In terms of a lot of the things that, Helen, you were talking about are wider issues around road safety, congestion, parking, issues that are relevant but not necessarily part of this scheme. That doesn't mean that we're here and we haven't heard, but this scheme is quite limited in the nature. And overall, I would still say I have been reassured by the amount of work that's been carried out in the background by our officers. And we don't necessarily include everything that was discussed because it's a report and it has to be succinct enough to understood by lay people. And so a lot of work continues. We always put, after the schemes have been delivered, we always monitor to ensure that those outcomes have been hit, and if there are issues, we usually go back and, as Councillor McBride said, look at if improvements can be made in anything that's outstanding. So can I reassure members of the public who are listening and those in this chamber that we will continue to listen to the concerns, but in relation to this particular scheme, I believe the officers have listened and are putting forward a scheme which is viable, solves the majority of the issues that have been brought up through surveys, through consultations, through listening to the various sources and constituent parts of our community. So I would welcome this report to Cabinet.
Yeah, I think the point that Councillor Mather has made about continuing to listen is crucially important, and we will do that, and we appreciate the comments, as Councillor Mather said, that have been made today. I think a number of the comments, as Councillor Mather remarked, are on the broader issues within Almonbury, and of course they'll need to be taken in consideration. However, for this specific scheme, certainly it seems to me from what we've been provided with that we have got some information about the crossings, the flow of student. Nobody is pretending it's perfect, nobody's pretending it's extensive over a huge period, but it certainly seems to make sense, particularly as there's been two different instances of that being taken by the officers, plus the other survey that's been done as well. So we actually do have some information. Certainly there's a logic looking at the diagrams as to where that would be placed. In my mind, I have no doubt from what we've been presented that this would improve the safety of pedestrians. And I think this goes back to the primary issue for me, and that's about shifting this priority within our urban areas in particular of vehicles over pedestrians, and that's the problem that we've had for a long time. We are absolutely trying to shift that. Not that we have some sort of vendetta against vehicle owners, obviously not, but that we address that imbalance, and the pedestrians now have much safer routes, and that we actually take their needs into account. So, for me, this is a good scheme. Absolutely, as Councillor McBride has said, there have been compromises. Clearly, it doesn't satisfy every single aspect, particularly around the parking, which is something which is going to be looked at ongoing. But I would certainly support this. I think it's a real step in the right direction, and I think we'll, not only for the school children, and I know I've emphasised the school children a lot because I think that that is important, because not just for their safety but for the encouragement of active travel to schools, which is something that we're really trying to do across Kirklees as well. But as it's been said, this will be an asset for the residents as well, and the wider residents. So from my perspective, certainly I support this.
I think it's fair, thanks Paul, I think it's fair to say there's a complex range of problems being thrown up. I think Highways have addressed them very well. I think they've tried their best to address a situation which is not ideal. So it's not a perfect solution. I think it's also very important, having put a scheme in place which is proposed, that it's reviewed and looked at again, not to suggest that it's not adequate, but it may need tweaking here and there to resolve problems that in the light of experience might be thrown up. But we do appreciate the comments made by everybody, including obviously the public, who can throw light on this in many ways much more effectively than anybody else, because of their direct experience, and they can articulate it. So it's in the light of that we've got to make a decision. What are my colleagues? What is your suggestion, colleagues? It's proposed to approve. I agree with that. So we are agreeing to approve. But with the comments that I made earlier, that we will look at the situation again, it will be reviewed, and certainly the points that have been made will be taken on board further by Highways. But I think, to be fair to them, they have responded very well so far to objections raised and tried to get a better and better compromise. So the hope is that, as in so many cases, that you may not have an ideal situation, but a situation as well handled as it possibly could in the light of the circumstances to be addressed. So we're approving that. So moving on to item 9. Who's going to present this? Is Karen? Yep.
Good morning, everyone. This is about an objection report for Cumberworth Road. Are there any objectors here for Cumberworth Road? No?
No.
Right.
No, there's no objections online. There's just an additional written response that I will read out.
Yeah. As part of the advertisement of the objection report, we received one further comment from one of the objectors, and I believe you've all been given a comment of that. In response, I can say that Ponker Lane is a rural road with no... sorry. Ponker Lane is a rural road. It's no development on it, and it's de-restricted. So the comment where he's asking, you know, and saying that it's 30 mile an hour and the double part, we're not convinced that that's the truth. The officer for this area confirmed that he's been up and down that road in the past about 5 times, and he's never seen any parking, let alone double parking. So it's not an area that we would look to traffic calm. So, as I said, the officer who's written the report is unavailable at the moment, so he's asked me to bring it. As part of another planning application, we're proposing to put 4 traffic humps on Cumberworth Road and reduce the speed limit from de-restricted to 30 mile an hour. The advertisement of the traffic calming scheme has taken place, and we got 2 objections, and the speed limit order will be advertised later. Briefly, the objections, I'll go through each one. That the first objector totally agrees with the traffic calming measures, but is concerned about snowplows catching the humps, vehicles leaving Skelmanthorpe having to stop to give way, or struggling to get over the humps, unnecessary air pollution, etc., etc. And he has suggested a 20 mile an hour speed limit, or the road narrowing on the downhill traffic lane, and 2 monthly part-time speed checking to ensure compliance by the Yorkshire Police mobile speed cameras. We accept that some drivers would slow down on the approach to the hump and then accelerate between features, but the scheme is designed in accordance with the necessary guidance, standard length, as much as possible to deter that from happening. From Lidgett Lane to the new development entrance, the road rises 20 metres over a distance of 364, and that's a 1 in 18 slope, which is not an excessive slope. The installation for 20 mile an hour speed limits requires average speed recordings to be no higher than 24. So in order to put one of those in, we'd need to put the traffic calming in anyway. Reducing the width to a pinch point, because of the visibility on the road, which is extensive, probably means that speed up to try and get through and exceed the speed limit. And mobile speed cameras is enforced by West Yorkshire Police, and it's used at sites where there's a high number of collisions, so it's not suitable here. That was objection number 2, I do apologise. Okay, where's objection number 1? I'm so sorry. Yeah, there's no. There we go. He's actually objecting on the grounds that if it snows and it's icy, the gritter won't be able to go over it and it will block the road. He doesn't think it should go ahead. So while there's a risk of this happening, throughout Kirklees, the likelihood and frequency is not very often. But if the traffic calming's not introduced, we're not going to get the 30-mile-an-hour speed limits past the new development which we need. So we are proposing, officers are proposing, that the traffic calming is installed and the safety benefits achieved and the speeds measured, slowed down from the restricted area of Ponker Lane, because it adjoins it, where there is already asked for traffic calming there as the objector. So I'll leave that with you.
So I believe the further comments are made from one of the objectors who were unable to attend the meeting but just wanted these comments noted by the committee. So thank you for considering my proposal. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend the meeting, but could you also make note that Ponker Lane is a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit road with cars double parked? This is another reason why we don't need speed bumps.
Any quick comments?
I think just again, thanks very much for that very clear presentation. It would be, if you like, nice in the world if we did have the ability to have enforcement and we had the ability to have mobile cameras and police and various other people that could do that. And you know, many times we've all witnessed some, to put it bluntly, crazy driving, and we think where are the police or where are the enforcement agencies now? But the reality is, as we know, that's not feasible. It's just not, you know, and particularly within the sort of semi-rural and rural areas, it's even more difficult. So the most obvious and sensible solution is to put something in place which actually ensures that traffic calming happens without the need to rely on enforcement. I think this sounds to me as if it's been done in a way in which is not going to inconvenience people. And certainly, as you say, in terms of the poor road conditions in snow, and unfortunately in some ways, as we've witnessed through changes in climate, we've seen that become even less of an issue in recent years. But even in the bad times, it is a relatively small window within the years. And so for me, this makes sense. I understand why people, you know, I absolutely understand why people feel that putting 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in will make a difference. Unfortunately, the people who drive in a way which you know, is not sensible or not reasonable really don't pay much attention to any signage. So we need to put something in which helps to calm traffic in a physical way. So for me, this is a sensible approach.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Yes, I too agree with the measures outlined. I do think, on the whole, sensibilities prevail. Most of us don't drive dangerously. Those that are going to do it, they will regardless. I do agree with the point about climate change. It's warming and it's less likely to have frozen roads or snow drifts and things. I acknowledge that people are open to objections. The objections have been noted, but I would like to agree with the measures outlined by the officers.
Thank you all. Agreed that we should approve this, notwithstanding the objections. I think the issues have been properly addressed. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for your contributions and the amount of work you've put in to make the meeting possible. Thank you.